the players coming up to take the penalty, and you might get live statistics to say, what's the chances of this player actually scoring or not?
Hi everyone, welcome to the Halftime Snacks podcast, a place where we snack about interesting topics in sports, business, technology, and everything in between. Let's get to it! On today's Halftime Snack, I'm excited to interview an experienced sports consultant from the UK. He's an associate partner at SportsX Consulting, and he has experience from working with the English Football Association and with Hawkeye. His experience covers everything from technology and innovation to brands, culture, and media management within the sports industry. It is my pleasure to introduce Harbir Guram. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Ronan. What a brilliant introduction that is. I hope I live up to that. Thank you.
It's great to have you on the show today.
Yeah.
You have around 15 years of experience in the industry. I would love to jump straight away to learn from your experience, and I would love to ask you as a first question, what are some of the challenges to successfully introduce new technologies to a sport, to a league, maybe to a team? What are some of the challenges that both the technology faces and the ones who are adopting the technology have?
From my experience, I think there's obviously a lot of focus being put towards delivery. So everybody's mindset is on obviously outlining a product, deciding on what it is, trying to get it delivered. And I think where sometimes there isn't enough emphasis is really around the topic of like change management. So this is all about how you get your users to start to adopt this technology. And essentially your users they're going to be the marketeers for your product. They're essentially going to be the guys that say, ultimately, it's great or it's not great. So having actually introducing that technology into these people, for me, is the most important part of actually making sure that this product is successful. Because I think going through the delivery process, you're very much in the sort of project mode and you get things done. But I think the bit afterwards is something that I feel companies need to sort of spend more time doing.
Wow, it sounds like it's a whole process, and I'm sure there's many things that both parties need to, solve between technicalities and also applications and how it's supposed to be used, because they are going to be the ones using it, so they're supposed to be using it. It sounds super interesting. And given that the world of sports changes every year very quickly, what are some of your favorite tech trends applications in the sports world today?
My background is data analytics, so I'm a data guy. I like data, and I think that's one of the things that I think's been really, really pushed on a lot in sport, both in terms of performance, so in terms of actually helping athletes and players, and also managers and coaches in terms of strategy and tacticians and understanding things around their performance and nutrition and well-being, but also around the business side as well. So obviously businesses, sports organizations, they use data a lot to understand more about their consumers, their fans, and what they're doing. And I think that's an area that I think is really, really interesting to me. I think as well, bringing it back to now in terms of like the COVID situation, I think we're seeing a lot more people becoming a lot more comfortable with data. In the UK, we spent sort of the last 3 months having like a daily briefing around COVID and what's happening, and every part of that sort of the initial start of that meeting, the Prime Minister has stood up and talked about statistics. So again, it's back to people's just sort of level of comfort, and I think what was once, when I first started, almost like a bit of a fear for statistics and numbers is really changed a lot recently. So that's a really big sort of area for me that I really love. I think another area as well for me as well, it's not really, I wouldn't say it's a favorite one, but I think it's something that's really important right now, is the whole sort of area around cybersecurity. So I think that at the minute, financial services, as an example, is kind of one of the most regulated industries out there. And yet, I saw in the news a couple of months back that one of the major corporate banks has already announced a data breach. I think I think sport is probably 2 or 3 steps back in terms of having a lot of emphasis within that. And I think there's a massive learning exercise. There's a lot more emphasis, I feel, that needs to be put into cybersecurity within sport.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Harbir. And I think, I don't know if you saw the movie Moneyball.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I think that movie kind of opened the path
yeah.
that maybe some teams were thinking about it, maybe some were, already developing something. I feel like with the whole introduction of looking at statistics to, make better decisions on the field and off the field, I feel like everybody started to adopt it in their own teams or the leagues using the right technology and the right data, which
Yeah,
is
the film was great, and the whole sort of concept around that was brilliant in terms of giving a platform for data analytics within sport. But I think one of the sort of fear factors around it, I sort of take, is that people sometimes assume that every single one of their decisions is going to be sort of forced through by data, and I don't think that will ever be the case. We need to always have, apply that human platform to it as well, because very often, when you're looking at data, there can be several reasons why you've come to an outcome. You may not even have the right number of right amount of data to even draw an outcome from that. So a valid statistical sort of control sample that you can use to sort of understand that data in more detail. So for me, I think we should definitely be embracing data, but I don't think it's ever going to change people's way of having to sort of put on the sort of human outcome in terms of understanding and analyzing that information and drawing out insight.
usually we may be looking at the wrong statistic, or maybe
Mm-hmm,
we may be looking at the wrong number that
mm-hmm,
is going to end up making us do the wrong decision. I think we're going to optimize in terms of data the place or the actual information that is relevant for
mm-hmm.
each one of the problems that teams and sports leagues and organizations are aiming to solve. And I'm really interested that now that you're mentioning a little bit about COVID, the way it's changed the way the sports industry is working. I'd love to know, what do you think about the focus around technology and about like how sports is now more dependent on some sort of technologies to connect with fans, to be more present while we can't really be there. So how did the focus on technology change since the beginning of the pandemic?
There was always, particularly with the bigger teams and the larger federations, a real sort of emphasis towards digital transformations going forward, mobile technologies. But I think, if anything, obviously the fact that fans can't actually go and watch these events, that's become even more prominent right now. I think that's been a really interesting thing to sort of see and develop in terms of how people are interacting with that. I've actually really enjoyed as well just reading and understanding about how how a lot of organisations are having to adapt their sort of how they use technology and how they're going to offer this to the wider audience. So, some of the examples that we've seen, for instance, within the NBA, and them using digital screens and having all the fans actually watching whilst this is going on, I think it's been absolutely fantastic. Having fan rooms as well, so people all over the world essentially can all come in, and if you're a particular sports fan, you can actually now engage with other fans, and I think that's been fantastic in terms of not only now but in the future, because a lot of these, a lot of clubs have fans all over the world. And I think that's been a really brilliant sort of initiative that's really pushed and kicked on because of this pandemic as well. And I think the other sort of examples that I've seen as well is around certain sort of product offerings that have had to change. So, I've listened to sort of conversations around certain companies that for instance used optical cameras. So they used cameras around concession stands in stadiums. So what they were originally doing pre-pandemic was understanding within a certain square footage how many people were actually going in and using those concession stands. And obviously, if there's more people using them, they open another concession stand. So essentially, what you're trying to do is reduce queue times. But what this company has actually done is actually now switch that offering to have more of a safety focus. So these cameras, what they're essentially doing now is looking at how many people are there in that certain square footage, and actually they need to be a meter apart, or they need to be 2 meters apart now because of the sort of social distancing that's happening right now. So I think that's been really interesting to see again how sport and companies are really sort of changing their offerings. I think as well from a wider perspective as well. I think, there's been a massive cultural shift. Everybody's now adopted working from home a lot more, which is great in terms of people's sort of work-life balance and how they're able to, how they feel. I think there's obviously always going to be a place for going into the office, but it's nice that they've been able to balance that. And I think with regards to technology on that front, the product suites that have these collaboration tools, which were once kind of almost seen as nice to haves, have really been really important right now. It's really important that they're there in this space. And I suppose bringing it back to sort of companies, SportX, for instance, the company that I work for, we've had to be very clear in terms of what our go-to-market propositions are. We've had to be very clear on the fact that we're focused on 2 or 3 of these areas, and also which is basically around sort of commercial and partnerships, looking at talent, and also technology. And in alongside that, also being very clear about which markets we want to work in, because again, I think you've got to have a strategy now. I think it's even more important given everything that's happening. The world isn't just one open book at the minute. I think there's changes and that everyone's having to face right now.
That's brilliant. I love your examples. I totally agree with you that the world is changing super fast. Probably the next year, sports is not going to be the same as right now, and maybe in 2 years it's going to be completely different. So yeah, it's changing super fast. I think we're just in the middle of the wave. We're not even on the other side. So I want to scratch, if you may allow me, I want to scratch a little bit on your expertise. I'm curious about knowing your opinion of, besides machine learning, AI, data, what do you see in the future for technology applied in sports in terms of, like, let's say 5-10 years? What do you think we're going to see? Maybe we're already talking about virtual referees that will substitute referees completely. We already, have VR and other some sort of technologies. What do you think? What's your opinion? Where are we going?
I think at the minute, one of the main sort of drawbacks, mainly around sort of sports arenas and facilities, is that they really don't have a lot of connectivity, Wi-Fi connectivity at your seat. I feel that there's a real opportunity there. Once these stadiums, and a lot of the newer stadiums that are being built right now, are going to have this technology already in place, and I think that opens up so many doors for different technologies out there. I'm imagining as a fan, being able to go and sit on my seat and potentially be able to choose the food that I want to have at half time, and someone essentially delivering that to me, and maybe even having a countdown clock, on my app to tell me how long it's going to be before I'm actually going to get that food, or having the ability potentially when a game's going on at a certain point in time to be able to pick my man of the match. I want to go in there, I want to pick that guy. He's played really well, or he's done something great. Watching halftime highlights, again, something that'd be really useful. Again, normally certain clubs obviously have that with sort of big sort of video screens in and around, but there are obviously certain clubs that don't have that infrastructure in place as well. So I think that would be fantastic, and I think that's really going to really help fan engagement. And again, I think that whole idea of engaging with other fans, so you're in this experience, everybody's in this kind of bubble of watching a game, and there may be some fans that aren't even at the game but they're still watching it. Having that ability to interact with them, I think will be really great, and I think that's again something that is possible with having better connectivity in place. And then finally, I think just almost this idea that you could have a game within a game. So you're sitting there essentially watching a game of football, and maybe you're getting something around, there's, for instance, a penalty incident that's happening. The player's coming up to take the penalty, and you might get live statistics to say what's the chances of this player or actually scoring or not. So I think all those sort of ideas for me will really sort of drive fan engagement a lot. And I think those are the things. I think once you get better connectivity, I think all these things are really possible. So I think that is probably the biggest kind of stumbling block at the minute, particularly in certain grounds. But I think once that starts to become overcome, I think all these sort of ideas and notions are all really achievable, and I think they'll all really help with the sort of fan engagement. I suppose my final sort of thing around it is really just to say that, again, one of the challenges, again, to counteract that is obviously we're going through all this digital age, which, we're going through all these experiences. And I think that kind of goes back to my point around sort of data and cybersecurity. So obviously, again, one of the things that we need to be careful of is obviously more people using applications is obviously heightening the risk that data breaches can occur as well. So, I'm really excited. I think I think I've seen a lot of the stadiums that are now being developed, for the next World Cup, some of the stuff that's happening in and around the world, and everybody's already thinking that is almost one of the number one, activities that they want. They want to make sure that they have seamless Wi-Fi in their stadiums so people can do all of the things that I mentioned.
I also see it as being as a more dynamic experience, having everything connected and,
Yeah.
knowing everything in real time in terms of like concessions and maybe bathroom lines. The whole experience is going to be so dynamic. You're going to be able to watch highlights. Maybe you're in the stadium and you saw a shot that was just across the bar and you want to see it in the next second in your phone.
Exactly.
So you're going to have it. It's going to be very dynamic, very quick. And I think it's going to be fantastic. Once we get, fans back in the stadiums, it's going to be very interesting to see how quickly can we adapt to that new dynamic experience.
Agree, and I think on that, Ronan, as well, it opens up the possibilities as well. Like I was saying before, if you're sitting there interacting and say that was a great shot, maybe you're interacting with people that are in Singapore, that are in Hong Kong. All these other, everybody's all sort of kind of sharing the experience. They don't have to be in the stadium to do that.
It's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward totally for it. And, Harbir, with my last question, I would love to hear your insights from your whole experience on, joining the sports industry, working very closely with super interesting technologies. I would like to ask you, for me and for all the listeners of the show, what advice would you give to a recent graduate or a youngster who's, trying to get into the sports industry and maybe in technology as well? What would you advise?
Don't take no for an answer, I suppose, is one. You are going to get setbacks. There's no doubt, because a lot of people want to work in this industry. There's a lot of demand to try and get into it. So being sort of accepting the fact that you may get rejection, but you've got to keep going, got to keep trying. And if you're passionate about it, you'll get there. I think one of the other things is really, that's what I find that's really important, is looking at yourself and thinking, well, how are you different from everybody else that's going to apply for this role? What is your USP? What's the thing that's going to make you stand out compared to everybody else? What are you doing? So I think that's really important, that people actually try and think about those other things in terms of what they want to do. And I kind of think some of the things that I've done, in terms of working, doing some freelance work right now, I don't have to do that work, but I do it because, I have a passion for it. And essentially I want to keep continue to be relevant in terms of what's happening within the industry. I think all of that's really, really important. I think as well, you've got to think about how determined are you as well to try and push on. I think you've got to have some drive and perseverance to keep going. I think people have got to be aware. It's sometimes it's not all about grades. People get very hung up about about what you're getting. And I think obviously there's obviously a certain amount in there. You can't expect people to just get. You've got to have a certain level of educational attainment. But I think if I'm looking at two people and one of them's come from a tier 1 university but they have no personality, and another one's coming from a tier 2 university, but they're really engaging, they're really well liked by their peers, they're really hardworking. Which one am I going to choose? I mean, I'm going to choose the second one. So I think that's really important. And then I think kind of my final point really on it is that I think networking as well is a really important tool. And I think that's kind of changed a lot from when I first started. So networking for me was kind of like this really daunting activity where you have to go and speak to someone that you don't know, what you're going to say, what you're going to do. And I think obviously LinkedIn's helped with that, because obviously it's taken away that human interaction per se. You're going through a computer, but I think at the same time you need to have the ability and confidence to talk to people. And it's really important, how you're meeting and greeting people. People will help at the end of the day. If you've got drive and determination and passion to do something, people will try and help. And the final kind of point is don't be afraid to ask. So for instance, if you're sitting there and you're engaging and having a conversation, don't be afraid to ask that, can I come and work, come and work shadow you or do something with you guys? What's the worst that can happen? Someone's going to say no, and then you go on to potentially ask somebody else.
Wow, Harbir, those are really amazing. I really appreciate your insights, and I think that's also a great place to end our conversation. I really want to thank you for sharing so many. Wow, it was this episode is full of pure knowledge in technology and sports. I really appreciate you coming on today's halftime snack. I'm grateful to have the chance to speak to you, and it was great to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time, Harbir. Before you leave, I want to thank you for listening. To hear these or any other halftime snack, check out the full archive on my website, which you can find on the show notes. See you next week!